All right, guys, welcome back to the No Switch Fitness podcast. And today we have a really important topic. I think it's one that can be really impactful to contest preps and something that's not discussed enough, in my opinion, as I think it can be a really big aspect of having a successful contest prep. And bringing the topic with her today is Jamie Granville, one of the No Switch Fitness coaches and educators. So really excited to dive into this topic with you. I know that this is something that you wanted to discuss because of just how frequent both of us have seen this become an issue for our clients. Yeah.
Yeah. And I totally nerd out on the systems and processes. I think you do too. You really like to dial in processes, and refining that.
Yeah.
Right. And this is just an area where I see that people tend to they overlook it.
Yeah.
I think one of the things too that it can really allow for is mitigating stress, because there's an allotted time for everything that gets done. And there's a couple of things that can kind of start to determine how you set this up and what this looks like for different psychological profiles. But let's talk about what to prioritize, because I think prioritization is where this falls short. People don't know how to prioritize the things that need to get done. And I think potentially going over the categories of what to prioritize kind of kicks that off in the right direction. So I know for you, one of the big things is that morning routine, because I know that that's kind of what kicks your day off, especially your little steps that you do in the morning. So if you want to share potentially a little bit of your morning routine and kind of what you see, why that's such a big aspect of setting that day standard, because I think that's where it starts. It's the moment you get up.
Yeah. So for me, one of the biggest things is getting up at the same time every morning. And then it's not only, it's the night before I set my schedule. So I put it in my calendar, but I also write it down. And I don't know whether it's because I'm old, but I need to write it down in order to kinesthetically have it absorb it or something. But so if I don't get up at the same time every morning, my entire day is thrown off. So it's that consistency piece of getting up and just doing that one good thing in the morning creates other good things that happen, right?
That's go ahead.
Well, and I just think that especially in a contest prep setting where we only have so many hours in the day, and there are a lot of things that we need to prioritize that are usually a pretty big time sink. And if you don't have that set up so that you know what you're supposed to be doing when you're kind of leaving your day to luck. And then you get to, of course we need to prioritize sleep. We get to the end of the day, we have all this stuff left to finish. And then usually things just fall off, and then you don't check the boxes that are the most important.
Yeah. And I think that first action in the beginning of the day sets the framework for that, because I forget who I got this from, because I would like to give them credit, but there's going into every day 3 big tasks that you should aim to complete. And it's writing those 3 big tasks down and aiming to set up your day where nothing else gets done until those 3 big tasks are done.
Isn't it the guy that wrote the book, Eat the Frog First? Was it called Eat the Frog First? I have the book beside my bedside, actually.
I believe so. I can't remember the guy's name.
And it's get the thing done first that you dislike.
Yep. Because you're most likely to get it done because it has the most energy requirement if you dislike it, right? And so when we look at setting up a day, that's how I used to structure my day, is do the thing that I don't like to do first thing in the morning, which for me is typically writing new client plans, just because it's very tedious. It's back and forth from the new document of making sure I have all the things organized that they need and going back and forth between that. And so I used to, in my old schedule, which my new baby Ellie has kind of thrown to the window, but that's okay. We're getting back to it. Is like wake up 5 a.m. That first entire hour, I literally would not do anything other than write that new client plan. And then I would do the things for my morning routine that I like at around 6:15, which for me is like coffee and breakfast and some steps and some things like that. So there's ways to structure your day where you're really productive from the moment you get up. And I know there's some people who say like, working first thing is not a good thing to do. For me, it gets me ahead. And the one trap that I try to make sure I don't fall into is the email trap. Because you look at your email and you start answering emails, you're just going to sit there and continue to answer emails. So when it comes to like daily schedule, I do really like the top 3. That is one that I'll use with people as far as like the biggest 3 things to complete. So for most people, it's going to be prep related activity. So cardiovascular activity steps first thing in the morning when they get up. Their next thing is work. So whatever that work looks like for them. And then training. And that's typically like the 3 things. And I actually made a reel about this. People love to take on more responsibility for new things when they're in contest prep. And it's like, you've already got those big 3 things you've got to complete every single day. You're adding a 4th thing that probably shouldn't be added, right? So that's where I see a lot of people fall short. But I really like that one. Another one I really like is block schedule, which is kind of just a more organized extension of the top 3 things. But I know I use a block schedule. Have you ever gone through it that way? I think you do because you sent me your schedule the other day.
Yeah, I mean, I just put everything in, like down to, not like right now, well, because I work from home, it's pretty easy too though, but I do put my cardio in. And I do, like, I put everything in there so I can visually see it so that I know. However, at the same time, it's like you don't want to overcomplicate things. So, I had this discussion with a client just the other day about that contest prep is actually really simple. Like if you look at it, you take away all of the things that we create around it. It's really simple, and you just have to do. There's say like 5 important things. That's all you need to do. But people like overthink it, and then they overcomplicate it.
How much do you think people let distractions get in the way of the things they need to do rather than, so like for me, for example, one of the traps that I kind of find myself falling into is I get interested in a topic. I want to learn more about it. And then I go down this rabbit hole. And then 50 minutes later, I'm like, figured out what I wanted to learn, but I've also wasted 50 minutes of my day figuring out what I wanted to learn. How much do you see that becoming an issue within that day-to-day structure?
Well, I think that it's like, I think that we do have a lot of distraction in prep. A lot of it, I think, comes from social media.
Yeah, I agree.
Right? But I think that if you were to take a person out of contest prep and put them into, like, say, improvement season or just normal life, one of the things that I think is distracting is like social events and food. And usually, and we don't really realize that, right? And it's like, but when you're in a contest prep setting, you usually do remove yourself a lot from social events. One, because of just a time, but then you're also exposed to, like, food and drinking and whatever else. And then also, of course, you're very limited with the amount of food that you can have, and you're pretty hungry.
Yeah.
So we don't have the luxury of those distractions when we're in prep. And so I think people try to fill it up with other things to distract themselves.
Instead of just spending the time on prioritizing the things they're trying to execute then. Yeah, I would 100% agree. Because as we progress as a society with the digital age, the desire for something constantly in front of us is there. Like, you can just go into a grocery store and see this happen. Like, if they're going to the grocery store at a busy time and you look at the line and people are waiting in line, where is everyone? They've got their phones right here and they're scrolling through whatever as they wait for the line to go through. I'm just as guilty for this. I'm not putting this on to anybody other. I do this myself. So I think that this is where we need to kind of potentially understand, like, what are the major pitfalls that we see? How to create a successful process for each individual? Because I know some people that a block schedule would drive them nuts. Like Emily would never do it. She would never, ever do it. Like she cannot process having a exact time to do something every day. Like she knows what she needs to get done. She kind of gets it done on her schedule, but that's not going to work for everyone. So how do you kind of work through that dynamic with clients when we look at potentially addressing those psychological differences and like just probably just getting them to avoid those major pitfalls?
Well, I think that it comes down to, well, like you said, like personality, but and then also what is their career?
Yeah, it's a big one.
So, I mean, you really have to work hard sometimes to help people create those routines or those processes for people who might say work shift work.
Yeah.
Right? Because they're running on a different schedule altogether. And they're going to be like added obstacles in there for them. And I think that it's what I usually get people to do is I will get them to write down the things that they know they need to do in order to be successful. And I think like we do that in our tracking sheets, right? And so that I think that it's reinforced every day. But I get people to do a list and it's like, okay, like say you do work 9 to 5. So then you have that chunk of time 9 to 5 that is gone that really like you can get your meals in, you can get steps in, you can maybe escape to do half an hour of cardio at lunchtime. But now you're limited to that time before 9 and then that time after 5. And so it's like, okay, if we're prioritizing, if you need to figure out what to prioritize, write those things down and see what ones are going to set you up for success, have the highest grade of success, highest amount of success with them. And then the rest of them, you draw a line through it.
Yep.
Right? And I think that's hard for people to get rid of stuff because they think that they should be doing more. Yeah. Right? And so from there, it's kind of building out their day. And it's trial and error, honestly, in the beginning, especially for someone who's never done this before. So I think that's also like, we talk about timelines quite often, right? Which I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because that's of course it's very important. But with those people, it's like, sitting down and setting up that timeline to give them extra time to build that foundation beforehand, to have everything dialed so that there aren't any lost days or weeks trying to figure out plan B, plan C, plan D, right? And doing it that way. But then on the flip side, you have people who are experienced, who have been doing this for a while and they have their routine set up. But I think the thing that they don't realize is the fact that they can still pull more out of that and they can refine it so that they can be even better.
I think one of the things too is people fail to realize the value of time. So, especially when it comes to like the monetary value of time, because there's so many little things that you can do to optimize that time efficiency scale that make you more productive. So like a big one for me is grocery shopping, right? How long does grocery shopping take? You got to drive 10, 15 minutes to the grocery store. You walk around the grocery store, get everything you get. That's like 25 to 35 minutes, depending on how quick you are. Pay, pack, drive it all back, get it all. You're like 2 hours deep by the time you finish that whole process, right? And so like weeks where Emily maybe can't go grocery shopping or it's not kind of the thing that we're doing together, paying for groceries to be delivered to my front door has been one of the most time-saving things that I've ever done in my life. And it's so easy to do on contest prep. It's like, yeah, you're sitting there doing cardio. You got to be on that mother effort for an hour. Have someone else take that hour to use it for your success, right? And if you look at it, yeah, sure, maybe you're paying a $10 delivery fee, but are you making more than $10 an hour? I can guarantee you most people are, right? So
I love Instacart. And I love how at the end when I put my order in, it tells me how many hours I've saved from shopping. The only time though that I will go and get groceries though is if I need steps.
Yeah, because it is a good way to kind of walk around and get steps.
It is. But otherwise, like, the other thing I do too is like I will go and do a really big shop at Costco, and I'll drop like $600 or $700 and fill my freezer so that I have like enough protein and like meat for like at least 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah, and that's another way to kind of, bite it in the butt. But there's so many little things when you look at that as far as like ways you can optimize your schedule in that process, and kind of, externalizing those tasks that you can externalize. Right now, for some people, like the tighter the financial budget, the less likelihood that is, and the more strict you just need to be with your schedule and the less you can juggle. I do think that a lot of this is kind of, and I bring this back to the beginning, the bookends is what I call it. The bookends of the day is like that morning routine and that night routine, because I think that sets the stage for you to already be done with what most people get done by noon, by 7, 8, 9 a.m. Yeah. And I think if you book in those days with a routine that's a non-negotiable, it makes that middle portion of the day so much more productive. And you really kind of find yourself being able to do just that much more and handle that much more. And so as we kind of start into, and I know this is something you wanted to touch, like setting up rituals is a big aspect of that, and why you're fairly passionate about that being the way that you discuss this with your clients.
Well, I mean, if you look at any high performer, so whether that's like an athlete, a student, an entrepreneur, a CEO, they usually have similarities despite the difference in discipline.
Yeah.
Right? And one of the things that they usually will share is a ritual, like possibly more than one. And what I think with rituals is it's like the regular rhythm or activities that reinforce what matters to us. Mm-hmm. And so they're levers for performance. And it's almost like check marks in your brain. And I think that it's because our brains aren't designed for creativity or performance, but like survival. Yeah. And so morning rituals can be powerful because they disrupt that like wake, defend, protect, survive mechanism that kicks off as soon as we wake up. And they help us to like center our focus and direct our psychology towards productivity. And so they just help us get into a physical rhythm. So it's like it fosters cadence, consistency, where normally our lives are pretty chaotic.
Yeah.
And I often, like, you have a baby, right? I actually, like, if you think about, we're creatures of habit, and small children do really well on schedules.
Yeah, they do.
They're just smaller versions of us. And it's also like having that set routine, that schedule, it also makes us feel safe.
Yeah.
And it helps to, like you said, to pull down stress. So if you know what's going to happen, which, I mean, it's not always going to go exactly how you want it to, right? But we tend to just operate a lot better when we feel like we're in that safe place and we're not constantly guessing throughout the day.
Yeah. I think that was the next point I was going to make is there's going to be times where you need to be able to have the dynamic ability to shift, right? And to leverage that time in different ways when things happen. Because I've certainly been in time periods where it's like, you've mapped out your day, you've got things going, and you realize something needs to be immediately done, whether it's like for things that I think about is like the launch of a new product for J3U, it's like a new course, or we have the opening coming up or whatever it may be, and I need to get this done now, or we're dropping a new YouTube thing for No Switch Fitness, and I need to make sure everything's good for that. That's kind of where it should have been taken care of on the forefront, but there's going to be times where you miss something or things get kind of need to be pushed up to the front, and you need to be able to leverage that time. So what I do in those situations is I go to my calendar and I take the task that I originally had in that time block, I move it to a different portion of the day, and I bumped the less important thing that I had on that schedule. And so a lot of times that looks like something that I was planning to work on that's working on it ahead of schedule gets bumped to the next day, and I work on something that's more pertinent from a time perspective. And so I think that's, again, it kind of brings you back to the value of time, right? And making sure that you value that. I do like alarm systems as well, especially like setting time blocks for things that you need to execute on, because it keeps you from like doing a check-in and picking up the phone, or doing a couple things and getting distracted on the internet. Like, you know that you have 30 minutes to finish this task, and you want to give yourself, typically, like, I give myself about a 15-minute buffer for how long I think the task would take, in case you have like things that you need to think about throughout that. And so like one thing that I do is my alarm every morning when I start, it's got like a saying about earning your respect. But then I'll oftentimes, like 5 minutes after my first alarm, set another alarm that's like the first task of the day, so that I've literally got 5 minutes to wake up, get out of the bedroom, get moving, see that task, and move into it.
I think too, just talking about time, is being proactive about time needed, because it increases as prep progresses.
Yeah, setting up that schedule for the flexibility.
So at the beginning of prep, I mean, it's like everyone is like super stoked. They're really excited because now they're going to get lean and they're getting food taken away, and like, I'm going to get jacked, and oh, this is really easy because I actually only have like, I have half an hour of cardio, and I just have training, and my sleep's really good, and blah, 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 right? Everything seems, and my brain is functioning. And I think what it is having that awareness and being proactive with clients to let them know that, like, plan ahead, because you're going to have to invest more of your day. And like, I can just go through an example of my daily schedule right now, because it's 6 hours of prep, basically, is what I've figured out, right? So, and we've changed things a few times with, like, this worked at this time, and then now I'm at this stage in prep, so we needed to change things because there are things that are higher priority. So I had to shift my day because, energy is higher in the morning, so let's do the stuff that requires the most energy so that later in the day I can actually prioritize recovery and sleep. But it's, like, I get up usually at 5, and I'll have coffee, and I'll go for a walk for like half an hour outside, to get outside, get fresh air, clear my head, get some like natural light on me. But otherwise, like, I've been walking to the gym to do cardio and then walking home. It's 40 minutes to walk there, and it's 40 minutes to walk back. And then I have 50 minutes of cardio. So that's like a huge chunk of time in the morning that I come home, I do some work, I eat, and then I'm back to the gym to train, which is like an hour and a half at least. And then I have another half an hour of cardio. So there's like basically my morning.
All gone.
All gone. Yeah.
All gone.
And I don't think
it
that
just kind of
people
gets to show
actually
you
realize that.
Yeah, but you're at the nuts and bolts of it, right? 5 weeks out, like, it's kind of just crunch time and go time. That's not obviously what it looks like throughout the entire thing, but that flexibility of knowing that the daily routine is so important, but that you're able to shift that daily routine to whatever that looks like in that time period is such a overlooked and valuable skill. So, as we kind of gone through this, I think one of the reoccurring themes is consistency is key. And I think that people, especially psychologically, the people that tend to be a little bit more free-spirited, I will use as words, may struggle a little bit with that consistency piece, where you really need to find a way to find a solution to that. And the way that I go about that is typically having a different schedule set up for the weekend than I do for them during the week. And I've actually discussed this with clients as far as like managing cardio relative to training time and planning the training days that they don't do cardio on the weekend, so that when they are in the weekday, they're following that really set structure, and the weekend gives them a little bit more flexibility of just get your training session in and go. Now, there will be a point in prep where those days have cardio too, but it allows in that time period to be able to kind of have that flexibility on the weekend. And we've even talked about this, and not to get too deep into it, setting up nutrition where it's that way too, right? Like with people who have kids and stuff. So I think find what you can be consistent with. And if you're able to do that, you'll be able to execute on the non-negotiables and create the outcome at the end of the day, because your consistent execution will tell you how you need to adjust as you go through it.
I also think too, and it's like when people set up those, like, say, simplify things and just have like those, say, the big 3 that they need to check the boxes with, and they see consistency and they see that it creates progress, and they're able to do it. What it does is it creates more momentum for them to really want to refine in other areas. Because it's like, I get that under my belt. I'm really good at I'm grabbing the low hanging fruit, and I've got that dialed. And there's some other stuff that I'm not as good at. But once I get this dialed, then I can focus on those things that, yes, are going to pull up more progress, but I need to like fix this stuff first.
I agree. 100%. We've waded through this topic fairly heavily. Is there anything you think we've missed as we've kind of gone through this so far?
Well, I think that one of the big things that people need to be really honest with themselves about is determining their limiting factors before they start prep.
Like the things that may take time away from them?
Or it's like the things that they can't change, like, responsibilities that they have.
Yeah.
So, it's like kids. I'll throw it out there, because kids are like, as much as we control our kids and their schedules, we really don't, like, and they do take a lot of time, especially depending on what age they are. Yeah. But your limiting factors too is like I said, like your career, or maybe your partner's career, or even like the whole financial aspect. So, competing is very expensive, and yes, maybe you can afford it, but if it's pretty tight, then it might look totally different for someone.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think that that's something that you just need to be really clear about and really honest with yourself are those limiting factors.
I think what that does too, when you look at those limiting factors, is it tells you where you could potentially go wrong during prep as well. Potentially what you're going to need to combat across the prep process. I typically really like to do that on the forefront, like before the prep even starts, which is the whole reason I do the pre-prep phase, right? Like set up a system that's going to start to point out the things that they need to get done in their day and what that structure looks like, and then go from there. And that's really the biggest value I find in the pre-prep phase is, finding out what that limitation is going to be for that athlete.
I guess the one thing that we could just talk about is like, how does our coaching method establish rituals or awareness?
Yeah, so there's a few different ways. I think the timelines and setting up the phases really allows the athlete to be prepared for what's to come. I think there is a aspect of getting your life ready for prep that is really important to have. And this would be things like big events that you're going to and or not going to, setting up kind of that time duration for expectations for your surrounding family members. Understanding that you need to inform them ahead of time of, there's going to be 2 to 3 months where like my activity level is going to be so high that my energy level for extra stuff is probably going to be pretty low. And prioritizing what that looks like to fit that into your family time if you do have a family, right? And I think the timelines is a big aspect of that. And we're not going to get too far into the timelines, but just having those phases built out so people have expectations of what's to come. That's a large portion of it. And then also too, there's portions of the check-in sheet that talk about daily habits, and then also like what needs to happen the next week, like goal setting for the next week. Because we're human. We're going to mess up and we're going to fall off our rituals and our schedules. And it almost serves as like a grounding for them to be able to do that.
Yeah, I definitely was going to say with like the rituals or awareness is our check-in sheets.
Yeah.
And I think that it's something that is very simple. In the beginning, it can be very overwhelming for people, but it's part of the morning ritual.
And it's like part of that sitting down and doing the things that's the task for the day.
And it's accountability for them too. And it gives them, it really allows them to see what they're doing and what is going on, because you can see the trends that are happening. Right? And it brings them into the loop too, so that they can have an understanding of the process. And it's not just us telling them what to do.
Yeah. And they see that start to come to fruition as they go through it as well, which buy-in is important, and having those people buy into that process is an important aspect of it. So I think there's ways that you can foster it through communication as well. Yeah. Using the Loom videos or the occasional Zoom call to recenter an athlete. Like I just did this with Josh today. And shout out to Josh. He's like, just become a part of the business. He quit his job and became a part of a business that's kind of like on the uprising. And he's like, I want to say he's 3x the monthly revenue in that business since he's become a part of it. So it's taken a lot out of him, potentially 4x. He's killing it. But he joined that team, took his role within the business as an owner, and has just completely turned this business into one of the most profitable setups that you could do. That's come at the expense some weeks of not filling out the tracker very well. And, sometimes that requires a recentering, right? It doesn't mean he's not executing. I know he's doing the things he needs to do. He's eating his meals. He's training. The progress shows that. That's not the part that I'm concerned about. It's more so just keeping him as like a high-performing individual in Josh that he is, keeping him back to like, hey, this is part of being a high performer, right? And making sure that he's able to continue to do that. And I think that's important. There's not anything. I think there's something to understand that it's not speaking to them in a bad light or negative towards them. It's out of the desire to keep them at the high level that I know that they can perform, which when it comes to people with the psychology of like Josh or you or people like that, there's so much untapped potential in that individual that sometimes they need it pulled out of them. And that's kind of where, your role as a coach is to remind them, hey, you're capable of more. And then they do that, they see it, and that buy-in of continuing to do that is there.
Well, and I think it comes back to like we've talked about before, meeting your client where they're at. And I think that we go through different cycles or different phases, right? And like you said, like with Josh, because his values are a little bit different right now. It doesn't mean that he isn't performing well as an athlete, but he needs to shift his focus to something else right now. And that comes down to like the whole, there isn't balance, right? Like in a contest prep setting, there's no balance. If you're excelling at work and you're wanting to excel in your profession, your career, there's no balance. So guaranteed when he was in prep, the business aspect probably was on the back burner.
Yeah, he was at his old job where he had a lot more of a flexible schedule, is what I would say, right?
But even for me, so just as an example, being in prep, it's like I can't focus 100% of myself on business, right? Yeah. Yes, I still have to prioritize my clients, and they still need like my coaching. But when it comes to the whole growing the business and like putting extra into the business side, that kind of has to be put on hold right now, because where is my focus? Where is the other majority of my energy going? To prep. But I think it's just meeting your client where they're at, so maybe for 6 months they're totally dialed with their check-in sheets and like giving you like really, really good feedback and whatever else. But then we get to a point where it's not working for them for whatever reason. So we come up with a different method, and as long as that method is still consistent.
Yeah.
So if it's like comes down to it's just an email template for a few weeks or a couple months, and they send me a voice memo, as long as I can hear them and hear what they're talking about and the tone of their voice, or whatever it is, that usually is a good indicator for me to see where they're at.
Yeah, absolutely. I use that with a couple of mine. Yeah, I use that with a couple of my people as well. So it's just finding that system and what that looks like and going from there. But I think that covers it. I think just to kind of summarize, like, systems are there for a reason. They're there to make you more efficient. They're not there to stress you out or to make you a rigid individual. It's there to help you, right? And so the level of system that each person needs looks different, and meeting that person where they're at, and honestly, you being willing to do it as well, because that's a big aspect of it too, is like, hey, this may be the way that you've done it so far, but you're coming into this business and into this system in order to take yourself to the next level. It's like, there needs to be a willingness to adapt into what I think could potentially get you, or what you think could potentially get them to a higher level, and being able to implement that well and execute on it. So when it comes to like time management, consistency is the biggest thing, and not being afraid to fail. There's going to be days where you just don't get it all done. Take a mental note of that, change the schedule as you need in order to adjust for that time period and move forward. Right. So.
Yeah. And I think too, it's like, it's a good indicator if you have total consistency all the time, and everything feels really good and like you're in a groove, and then all of a sudden things don't. That's also a good indicator of like something is maybe going sideways. So it's another important piece of having that consistency and creating those trends, or being able to visualize those trends, not only for coaches, but for the person, right? I think that it allows them to be more connected with their own biofeedback.
Yeah, and more accurate reporting leads to better coaching. 100%. So thank you guys for tuning in. If you guys have any questions, put them down in the comments below. We'll be down there answering questions. Make sure, if you're watching this on YouTube, to like and subscribe to the channel. We have a ton of comments or content coming your way. And until next time, take no off switch in the pursuit of results.